welcome back. I hope you all are enjoying our journey together on qualitative research and learning a lot of great stuff about how to be a qualitative researcher, how to conduct interviews, how to prepare your protocol, and all those things. So, in our previous videos, we covered many topics. We talked about how to prepare your interview protocol. In today's video, I wanted to talk about some key considerations that one should keep in mind when you are conducting interviews. For me, as a researcher, based on my experience conducting qualitative research for many years, I think the most important quality, the most important skill that we learn as we do more and more research is how to conduct effective interviews. It seems easy, but it's very difficult, because what is happening in an interview, you are generating knowledge. So your questions are the tools which helps you invite the person to talk about their experience, and they come up, you put your question and they respond. So there is, your questions are like a stimulant, and which seeks responses, and the participant respond to those stimulations, those stimulants. So you as a interviewer and the research participants together create this knowledge. It's not a simple process of asking question and getting responses. In fact, I think it's about recreating those experiences. So when a person does interview, when a research participants sit with you and talk about their experiences, they are recreating those experiences again. If you remember in how our memory works, our memory is not like a storehouse where the files are stored and I just go back and take out those files and share. No, every time we think about something, every time we reflect, every time we think about our past experiences, we recreate those through our neurons and those processes. So interviewing is a skill that takes time, particularly for novice researchers. I would say have patience. You get better as you do your further interviews. So start your first interviews for your study, you get better in second, you get even better in third interviews. So it's a gradual process of learning. So in this video, I wanted to talk some of my experience as a qualitative research conducting interviews. And I also want to talk about some considerations that one should keep in mind as you start your data collection through interviews. So let's talk about some of those considerations. So the first consideration that I want you to keep in mind is the space that we use. What space? What space is more suitable to have an effective, comforting, authentic experience of a research participant? What space really facilitate that process? And I'm very careful when I'm doing interviews. So the first thing I do personally is I ask my research participant what space they want to be interviewed. So for instance, if I'm interviewing principals, high school principals, and so I ask them, do you want to be interviewed in your office, or you want to come to my office? So I ask them, I let them choose the space they feel comfortable. Do you want to be interviewed in your home? So the good thing is when the participant choose their space, I think I get more authentic, realistic, experiential data. Another thing I keep in mind is The space should be a comfortable space, quiet space, and safe space. I don't want to talk to a person in a cafe house where the person might be a little concerned about confidentiality. I avoid doing interviews where people are, you know, around. They are not close proximity, but they are still around. I don't want that. I want my client, my research participant feel comfortable, safe in this space. So, so that's a very important point, because when your participant is feeling safe, comfortable, then you get real data. There was a time when I was doing an interview with a school principal, and he invited me to his office. And it was a time around noon time when the school was still on. Students were there, teachers were there. So I was sitting in his office. I started, asking my questions. And then after 15-20 minutes, a teacher walks in, knocks at the door, and she has some issues that she wanted to discuss. And the principal was like, okay, I'm in the middle of an interview, and I'll get back to you, after the school hours. So what happened was, the rhythm was broken. There were interruptions happening. I recommend all of you make sure that there is less and less interruptions. Sometimes you can't really control, but try that when you are interviewing, there is no interruptions, because when the rhythm, the flow is broken, uh, the interview, the quality of the data that you get is not really good. And one thing you could do in that regard is make sure the phone is silent mode. Make sure, like the aeroplane mode or silent mode, whatever it is, the phone should not be there when you are interviewing somebody. And again, the same reason is, when the flow is broken, when there are interruptions, it really influence the quality of the data. So phone should be off for sure when you are interviewing. Uh, Another thing you could do is have a copy of the questions, a printed copy. And the idea is, when you have a printed copy of all the questions, obviously you don't look at your question all the time, but having a list of questions with you, make sure that you cover all the aspects. You do not forget, or you do not exclude any question that you want to ask. But do not keep it like you are like reading these questions and you are collecting the data from the person. No, you ask your question and then you keep it aside and be present with your research participant. Have a good eye contact. Look at them. Show that you are interested in what the person is sharing. So having a copy of your questions, interview questions, your protocol helps you in facilitating that. Also, another thing you could do is, we generally know as a researcher how much time it is going to take. So maybe based on the questions, I could say it might take maybe an hour or maybe an hour and a half to cover all the questions. However, you never know. Sometimes some participant may have such a in-depth experience of a phenomenon that you may need some extra time. So for that, always keep 15 to 30 minutes of extra time. Extra time. Keep extra time, because extra time is sort of a reserve. So if the person is sharing a lot of stuff, then you don't have to hurry the interview. So this extra time helps in making sure that uh, you have enough sufficient time to cover all the topics, all the questions that that you want to cover. So that's briefly about some of the things you want to be careful while conducting interviews. Now think about, so we talked about space and some logistics here. Now let's talk about some of the things like before you start the interview. So before you start interview, there are certain things you should make sure you do that. What are those things? Number one, check your audio recording system. Audio or video recording, whatever you are doing for your data collection, make sure they are working. Sometimes, people switch on their audio recording button and maybe the interview is over and then you realize the battery was weak and then it is stopped in the middle and you were not able to record the whole interview. So make sure that battery is fine, your audio recording system, whether it's a cell phone or another thing, to cell phone or separate audio recording. Keep in mind, in today's world, we all use our cell phone for recording because it's easy, and even the quality of uh, interview, I mean the audio interview is getting better and better in your cell phone, and oftentimes we as researchers use our cell phone for recording interviews. But think about if you are recording and then all of a sudden a person start calling on the same phone, that might interrupt. So make sure when you are recording, when you are using your own cell phone for recording the data, make sure you put it on aeroplane mode or some silent mode so that there is no interruption in terms of recording the interview. So it's very important to check your systems. Another thing before you start the interview is reiterate purpose of the interview. What is the purpose of the interview? Yes, you already have shared your, signed the consent form and all those things. So your research participant already knows what is the research topic, what might be some possible question you might be asking related to the phenomenon, the purpose of this study, but you restate it. Also, another important thing to restate before you start the interview is confidentiality. Confidentiality meaning, reiterate this, that whatever you share is confidential. This interview data that we are doing the interview, before I use it for data analysis, I'm going to de-identify the whole transcript. So explain the process to the research participant how you are going to use the data. So generally, I tell my research participant that after this interview, I'm recording this interview, I will transcribe this interview, and then I will de-identify. So I will remove your names or any other details you have shared which can help identify you. So I will remove all those things and then I will conduct the data analysis. And when we will write our research report, nobody can identify an individual because the findings will be shared in a group together rather than one participants. So what happens when you emphasize the confidentiality of the research participation? It helps participant to feel safe and feel open to share their authentic, deep experiences. So it's very important to address that or emphasize and restate the confidentiality before you start asking your questions. Another problem that if you do not emphasize the confidentiality, a problem happens where socially desirable. So what is the problem with if sometimes participant, if you ask them a question, they start answering your questions from a socially desirable perspective, meaning that what is socially acceptable rather than sharing their true experience, what they think about anything. about the phenomenon, they start sharing something which they think is socially acceptable or may please the researcher. If I ask a person, let's say I'm doing a political interview where I ask a person about a particular political party, and this person might, if this person might share things which, like, okay, what is like socially desirable to talk about, particularly if the topic is a controversial topic, sometimes religious topics or political topics where people find it hard to share their true feelings. So they try to answer your questions in a politically correct way or socially desirable way. So to avoid that, you have to emphasize this point that whatever you share is confidential. Another super important thing, and this is very important, emphasize that there is no right or wrong answer. Very important. Always state this before you start asking questions. Tell your research participant that I'm going to ask you certain questions related to this topic, and there is no right or wrong answer. What I am interested as a researcher is to understand your perceptions, your experience, your perspective. So there is no right or wrong answer. And this is very important to emphasize because, again, like confidentiality piece, it also leads to more authentic responses of your research participants. So it's very important to reiterate before you start the interview that purpose of your study, emphasize confidentiality of the research participants, and also state that there is no right or wrong answer. So that's very important to keep in mind. Now let's talk about some other aspect as well. So what about your stance as a researcher? What should be my stance as a researcher? I teach doctoral student, and sometime they submit their first interview that they have done. And sometimes I have seen some interviews which feels like sort of an interrogation. So I have my questions. Okay, question number one, what do you think? Question number two, question number three seems very mechanical and sometimes like an interrogation, which is not good. You cannot get a real, authentic, rich data if the interview come across like an interrogation with a person. So what should be the stance of a qualitative researcher while as an interviewer? It should be the stance of respectful curiosity. Always keep in mind this phrase, respectful curiosity. So when you are framing your questions, frame your questions in a way that you come across as a respectful, curious person. So that's very important to keep in mind. Respectful curiosity and not like an interrogation happening with the research participants. Always be respectful and always frame your questions out of like, okay, you shared this thing and I'm curious about how do you frame it? Could you tell me more about this thing? So put your questions, frame it as a respectful, curious researcher rather than a researcher who's doing some interrogation about a topic. Another thing related to your stance as a researcher is see, feel, touch, hear, taste the word from research participants' perspective. What I mean here, and this is very important point for an interviewer. whenever you are going to interview, oftentimes what happens is that our own perception, our own worldview, our own assumptions comes in the way of this process of interviewing. So to get a very good data, it's very important that you set aside your own assumptions related to the phenomenon. You set aside your own perceptions. You set aside your own attitude, perceptions, experience about the phenomenon. Completely set it aside. And then remind yourself that in here, between me and my research participant, I'm here to see the world, in this case, the phenomenon I'm investigating. I'm here to see this phenomenon from this person's eyes. I want to see, feel, touch, hear this phenomenon not from my point, not from my perspective, from this person's perspective. And to do that, as I said, you need to set aside your personal experiences, your personal assumptions, your personal values, your personal attitudes. Keep everything aside. The moment you enter an interview room, just tell yourself, like, okay, I'm going to take off my shoes before I enter this room. Metaphorically speaking, taking off your shoe is like, I'm taking off all my assumptions, all my values, my worldviews before I enter in this interview process. And as you do that, then you can see the experience of this person as this person has experienced, not from how I think it should be. So when it comes to your stance as a researcher, keep two things in mind. Have a respectful curiosity. Frame your questions from this perspective and tell yourself, I'm here to see the world, not from my eyes, from this person's eyes. I'm going to feel, touch this world, not from my hands, from his hands or her hands. I'm going to hear about the world, the phenomenon, not from my ears, but from the ears of this person. I'm going to test this phenomenon, not through my tongue, but from the tongue of this person. So it's very important to tell yourself, and it takes time. It's not like a switch off, switch on button that you can switch off and everything is gone. No, you get better at developing this stance as you gain more experience. Now, so that's about stance. Another thing, key thing about interviewing process is pay attention to non-verbals. But particularly when you are, I mean, these days people interview on Zoom, videos, and in person both. One limitation of conducting interviews via video technology is you don't have a comprehensive access to nonverbals of the research participant. You can only see this frame of your research participant on your laptop or when you are interviewing. But when you are doing in-person interviews, you have access to the non-verbals as well, more comprehensive access. So pay attention to non-verbals because non-verbals tells you information which sometime might not be there in the words that this person is saying. So let's say if a person is saying like, oh, that was very exciting, and blah, blah, blah. And while this person is saying, oh, I'm very excited. And I could say, yeah, I mean, thank you for saying that, but your voice doesn't show the excitement. So you see what is happening here. So, so pay attention to non-verbals. Sometimes the body language. What is the body language of the research participant? Is it coherent with what the person is saying? is the tone of voice is coherent with what the information this person is sharing. So these information, the non-verbals, can give you some more contextual data related to the phenomenon that you are investigating. So it's very important for a researcher to pay attention to non-verbals when you are interviewing your research participant. Another thing which I have observed and I myself have experienced when I started my own journey of being a qualitative researcher, conducting interviews, uh, I was very anxious in the beginning. Oh my God, how is it gonna look like? What if I forget a question? What if this person, feels like I'm not a good interviewer? So I was a little anxious before the beginning of conducting my first interview. So I want to tell all of you that it's okay to feel a bit anxious before your interviews, and it's fine. It's a learning curve. You learn and get better as you do more and more interviews. So if you're feeling anxious, it's fine. And I want you to keep in mind that if I'm doing an interview and if doesn't go well, you always have a retake. You can take retake. Um, you can conduct the interviewers again. So I always reminded myself, Rakesh, if it that's fine. If it doesn't come up the way I want as an interviewer, I can always go back. I can request my research participant, like, hey, I have some additional questions, and I think the interview, I'm not very happy with the interview. Can we meet again and do the interview again? So there is always this opportunity. It's not like you are doing a live performance and if it goes wrong, then you are doomed. No. As a researcher, and it often, not often, but sometimes rarely happens that you are not happy with what the interview looks like. So you can always request and redo the interview uh, with your research participants. Some other things to keep in mind when you are asking questions, be in the moment. What it means, being in the moment. And I'm telling you based on my experience as a researcher. So let's say I ask a question and this person started responding. Now I'm sitting on my chair and thinking what I'm going to ask next. So my mind is not here with the research participant, what he or she is sharing. I'm more focused on what I should ask next. So I'm looking at my sheet and thinking about the next move. So when you are not with your research participants, your probing questions won't come up because you are not focused there. You are not focused on what this person is sharing. You are focused on your next move. And it often happens because of if I'm very anxious before the interviews, during the interviews, this might happen. So be in the moment. Uh, and that's why I said that always keep a printed copy of your research questions so that you ask all your questions and you don't have to think about what I'm going to ask next. No, just if the question, focus on what the person is sharing, have some probing questions if you have, and then you can pause, take a deep breath, and look at your next question and then frame that. So be in the moment, be with your client. Also, when I say be with your moment, be with your research participants, attend to the person completely. Look at the body language. Look what this person is sharing, how this person is sharing. Pay attention to the tone of voice. All these nonverbals will give you more contextual data related to the phenomenon that you are investigating. Another thing to do, which facilitate rich data collection, is summarize. And so what happens, what is summarization? So let's say I ask a person, like, tell me your personal experience about empathy. Sorry, let's frame it other ways. So related to the, if I'm exploring empathy and I'm interviewing mental health counselors about their experience of empathy, I can ask, let's say, the question like, tell me your personal definition of empathy. How do you define it based on your experience working with clients? And let's say this person in the next 5 minutes shared his or her own definition based on their experience of empathy. So at the end of their response, I could say, okay, um, so you shared that empathy is blah 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 blah. So what I'm doing, I'm summarizing what this person has shared. And when you summarize, if there is any misunderstanding, that will come up. So when you summarize, the person say, yes, exactly, you got this. So it confirms that what I'm hearing is correct. So it gives you to reconfirm from the participant that you are hearing, you are interpreting it rightly. So summarize it. Sometimes also when you are interviewing, it's a good idea to do that. Like uh, say some brief phrase like, yeah, that sounds exciting. Yeah, tell me more about it. So humming uh, these fillers helps you to uh, create a rapport with your research participants. Another thing is silence. I'm smiling because many times I've seen researchers, particularly in the interview context, the moment a participant becomes silent while answering a question, let's say a silent for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, researchers get anxious, like, oh my God, I should interject. Maybe I should say something. Maybe sometimes the research participant is talking a very deep emotional experience and they become silent for a few moments. And and sometimes we become so uncomfortable with the silence that we try to jump in and try to fill that silence. Don't do that. Silence is also data. Silence also tells you something. When a person becomes silent, it it might tell you many things. Number one, this person is maybe like is is not finding right word to express what they have experienced. They don't find, and that's why they are quiet. This person might be emotionally so much aroused that the words are not coming. So silence could have different meanings. And oftentimes, when I conduct interviews, I do not interject. I just let the participant be in that moment, and I'm just with them. And then, after a couple of seconds, the participant again start talking. And if not, I can tell my participant like, okay, seems like it's deeply emotional moment for you. If you want, we can take a 5 minutes break. Uh, 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 if you need some more time, we can come back again and talk. So I always use silence as a way of getting deeper into the phenomenon, deeper into the experience that this person is sharing. So do not get anxious if all of a sudden this person becomes silent. Silence is also data. So capture that, notice that, use that. Now the next thing I want to share is what a bad interview looks like. And I think I talked briefly about it. A bad interview is something where it's like becomes more sort of a mechanical process rather than organic process. Mechanical is like, particularly when you are a novice researcher, people have their list of questions. Question number one, the participant answer. Here is question number two, participant answer. Question number three. And this whole thing looks like very shallow. By looking at an interview transcript, you can determine what is the quality of the data being collected in this interview. A good interview is a very organic interview where the researcher is very much present, and they have a, as I said previously, respectful curiosity. There are many probing questions, follow-up questions, rather than, and the bad interviews, as I said, they're more mechanical in nature. So the reason why I'm talking about this is because you should know what a bad interview looks like, so that you are careful when you are conducting your interviews with participant. Some other ideas, this is also very important. Be gentle. What I mean here is sometimes we respond to someone's experience or what they are sharing in a way which is not like very facilitative. So let's say if somebody is sharing about, they made some decisions in their life, and then I interject saying that, why did you do that? So this is my response to the research participant. This person is sharing about some decisions they made in their important decision that they made in life, and I framed it like, why did you do that? Rather than framing this question in this way, I would frame it, would you like to share what led you to make that decision? See, it's the same question, but rather than putting it, why did you do that? You can frame it, would you like to share what led you to make that decision? So be gentle when you are framing your questions. Your question should not come across to the interviewer, to the interviewee, that like an attack on the person, like putting a question mark on the decision they have made. So again, coming back to the idea of respectful curiosity. So as a researcher, as an interviewer, be gentle how you frame your questions. Frame your questions from the perspective of a respectful curiosity. There are some other ideas I want to share about conducting good interviews. And since this board is full, so let me just remove some of the content here, and then we can talk on those things. So another thing I wanted to talk about is, which is very important for a interviewer, is to keep a journal. So keep, when you are, let's say, starting an interview, let's say I'm waiting for my research participant. So you can write your journal, and as the purpose of a journal is to note down your thoughts, note down any ideas that you have, note down any analytical piece that comes to your mind being in that space, or maybe during the interview when a person is sharing something, if you have some ideas or anything, you can just note it down. For me, I think the most important thing, me as a researcher, which I use a journal, is oftentimes what happens. Oftentimes what happens is, let's say I ask a question and this person is responding to me, and then I'm listening, and then I have a follow-up questions. Maybe I remember something that I want to further investigate. But I do not want to interrupt this person who is still talking and sharing the experience. And what used to happen with me, by the time this person complete their response, I forgot those thoughts. I used to forget, like, oh, what was that which I wanted to explore further? What was my follow-up questions? And I tend to forget. So what I started doing is I kept a journal, and let's say this person is sharing something and I have a probing question or an idea or a thought. I just make a note on my journal. Now I'm present with this person, I'm not interrupting this person, and once this person has finished, has completed their sharing their response, then I look at my journal and say, oh yeah, I mean, I really like how you put it this way, and I have a follow-up question for you, and then I ask those questions. Or I have a wondering or anything, then I can share with that person. So it's very important, super important to have a journal when you are conducting interviews. And the purpose of a journal is to record your thoughts, your ideas, your follow-up questions, or your wonderings that you want to explore with your research participants. And finally, another thing which is important is your, again, the idea of being with research participant. And this idea is attending skills again is like, just make sure you have an eye contact with the person. Make sure your body language, your body posture shows that you are interested in what this person is sharing. You are curious to learn more about this person's experiences. Your body language should be more, maybe a little bit inclined uh, with the person. Also, when I do interviews, I do not conduct interviews where I'm sitting on a chair and the person is also sitting on another chair and there is a big furniture or there is a big table between between us. I love to prefer a space where I'm sitting on a sofa, this person is sitting in front of me uh, with some distance, and there is no object between us. So that's what I think about how an ideal interview in terms of setting should be. So it's very, to get a very authentic, realistic, rich data, you have to make your research participants comfortable. You have to make them feel that you care about what they are sharing, and there is no judgment involved. So whenever you are framing your questions, you frame your questions from the perspective of a respectful curiosity and no judgment involved. So being non-judgmental throughout the interview process is also very, very important. So these are a few ideas that I wanted to share with all of you regarding how to conduct an effective interviews as a qualitative researcher. I would like to hear your experience as well. So in the video, in the comments, you can come back and share what was your experience conducting your initial interviews, and what might be some other ways, methods that you use when you conduct your interviews as a researcher. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the day, and I'll see you again. Bye.